Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Woody Hayes Athletic Center for Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated. This is the Buckeye Report. I'm Brendan Gulick with Andrew Lind, and it was a very busy day here, not just because of Ohio State news, but because of Big Ten news. How about that? We get to talk to quarterbacks today, and we got to talk to Athletic Director Gene Smith, because this is as notable a day as maybe the conference has ever had on a macro scale. Why don't we start with the biggest news of the day, and then we'll kind of talk Ohio State quarterbacks after that. The Big Ten announces a media rights deal that will start next year and extend through 2030 with new broadcast partners, NBC and CBS. Obviously, Fox continues to be their primary partner. They'll still obviously be heavily partnered with Big Ten Network. There is no more football broadcast deal with ABC and ESPN, so that deal will finish at the end of this year. The conference championship game is going to now rotate between those other three broadcast networks. 5 of the 8 years from 23 through 30 are going to be on Fox, 2 on CBS, and 1 on NBC. A gigantic price tag that Gene Smith said is not yet final. But we are hearing that it's in the ballpark of $7 billion. So it's, a little less than $100 million per year per school, but it's a huge day for Ohio State and the Big Ten.
Yeah, and if you look back to what the deal was when they signed with Fox in 2016, originally started going away from ESPN and ABC, it's almost 3 times worth per year what that value was. So, it brings in a lot of money to the conference and, obviously positions them alongside the SEC as one of the 2 premier conferences in college football.
I think there's still a ton of things to be worked out, especially like where games are going to be available. There were questions asked of Gene about, hey, just from a fan perspective, like, do we all need to get Paramount Plus and Peacock and, this and that, figure out how to watch all these games. The good news from an Ohio State perspective, you kind of have to think that those games are not going to be pushed onto subscription platforms, at least with not any regularity, because they're going to get the most eyeballs.
Yeah, and I think that, if you look at it from a standpoint of who the conference or who the networks are going to select, it's always going to be Ohio State first, no matter, Fox or CBS or NBC has the first pick. Like, Ohio State is always going to be in a prime spot, except for those, maybe those lesser non-conference games that they can say, okay, hey, we're going to try to push Ohio State to play, Toledo on Peacock because that's going to bring in some eyeballs, or Rutgers or Indiana, or, something along those lines. So it's not like, I don't expect the premier games to be there, but I do expect at least, maybe one a year, kind of like how it currently stands with there's always that lesser game that's on Big Ten Network, or, back in the day it was on ESPN Plus or whatever. So I think it's going to be something similar to that. But yeah, as an Ohio State fan, for 20 years now, you've seen them on national television pretty much every single week, and I don't expect that to change.
Yeah, it's not going to change. And it's been kind of fun to watch, some of the things that are circulating on social media with the, CBS's college football music, which SEC fans are all mad about because they think it's their theme song, and now it's a theme song for the Big Ten. It just means more, right? And cool for NBC, right? The biggest, most watched program on television in the United States of America for 11 years in a row has been Sunday Night Football. And now they're going to have Saturday Night Football featuring the Big Ten every week for the next 8 years. That is a huge deal.
Yeah. I do wonder if there's going to be like a Carrie Underwood song, Saturday Night
They
Football,
should. That'd be awesome.
Something like that. Yeah. So, it's definitely cool. I think that on one hand, though, it kind of puts Notre Dame in an interesting spot. I know that Gene Smith said that, it doesn't necessarily force them to do anything, but you're taking away from Notre Dame, and Notre Dame's not going to be too thrilled about that. So, it's a matter of like, how do they value their independence more, or is it, they want to be a part of something that could be bigger than them themselves? So, yeah, it'll just be interesting to see how that unfolds.
And Gene was asked specifically about Notre Dame, like, hey, is this somehow going to help Notre Dame make a decision that they shouldn't be an independent anymore? And Gene gave his very usual answer about how he loves his alma mater, and he will always cheer for them until they play the Buckeyes. And then he put in there that historically Ohio State beats Notre Dame, and he made sure that was duly noted. I think the reality is Notre Dame is going to fight to keep its independence as long as humanly possible, especially with a playoff expansion coming up that would theoretically make it easier for them to get in the playoff without being in a conference. Obviously, those things are still to be worked out here in the next, maybe year to 2 years.
Yeah.
But I think Notre Dame makes all the sense in the world in the Big Ten, and they're probably leaving substantial money on the table by not being in the Big Ten. But I don't necessarily think that today's announcement is going to mean Notre Dame will be joining the Big Ten anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that, is down the road, especially with, the moving pieces. They obviously, Gene today kind of mentioned, and then the Big Ten, various stories about the Big Ten today have said that conference expansion isn't like at a standstill. Like they're actively looking to expand the conference. And, I think that if you look at the teams that Notre Dame plays on its, independent schedule, you'll see a lot of Big Ten teams, a lot of Pac-12 teams. And if really, if the Big Ten, goes out and grabs a Stanford or, like those kind of schools, or a Cal, and adds to that, then they can basically turn around and tell Notre Dame, like, hey, we're not going to, schedule you anymore unless you join the Big Ten.
Well, so and that's the big thing. If they can't get a schedule together either, that might force their hand.
Yeah, and I think especially with the these mega conferences that are coming, because I fully expect the Big Ten probably be at 18, 20 within the next couple of years. The SEC the same thing, and then everybody else, the ACC, the Pac-12, and the Big 12, they kind of create their own, and we really just get 3 of them. And Notre Dame's going to be in that situation where it's like, wait, who do we schedule? Like BYU's out there for another year, so it's not like there's a whole lot of options really for them to go to.
Did you see former President Drake referred to the Pac-12 yesterday as the Pac-10?
Yeah,
it was kind of funny.
There's a reason that he's no longer the university president here. So, I thought that was really.
I didn't know if that was a subtle shot at USC and UCLA.
I think that he doesn't seem like he's really aware of the athletic, side of things, and I think that was very apparent in terms of what happened with Urban, during his suspension, and then just the stark contrast between him and Christina Johnson. Like, she is all in on athletics, and he just, it was never really an importance to him.
I did read a report this afternoon that said that the Pac-12 is going to lose roughly $13 million per school per year now that USC and UCLA are in the Big Ten. Very, very interesting stuff as we look at how the landscape of college athletics continues to evolve. Okay, so one last note on that. Conference schedules are not going to be determined going forward now until October of the year ahead of time. So no more of this 5-10 years out. We know, hey, we're going to play, Rutgers at Rutgers on November, whatever, 2027. Like, that's not going to be a thing moving forward anymore. It will be determined basically in the heart of the previous football season what the next conference schedule looks like.
And that makes sense, especially, with like USC and UCLA coming in 2024, and then just, kind of how COVID impacted the 2020 season. And, they obviously redid this last year's schedule and this year's schedule right before the season so that, they could kind of accommodate the games that were missed and those kind of things. So I think that they're just learning that, it's all right to plan for things in advance, but then some things it's like, why are you doing this? I kind of expect like those far out games against, maybe Alabama and Georgia and Oregon to, maybe have adjustments too, because we don't know what college football is going to look like in a year, let alone, 6, 7, 8 years. So.
And even more so now than a decade ago. Is that ringing true? Okay, back to business inside this facility. We talked with quarterbacks coach Corey Dennis and all 3 Ohio State quarterbacks today. Of course, CJ Stroud, Kyle McCord, and Devin Brown. I don't think there's necessarily too much new to report. You kind of know what you got with this group. You got a Heisman Trophy caliber starting quarterback who many people think is the favorite to win the award this year. In fact, I think as I was looking through some of my photo memories on my phone, I'm pretty sure it was a year ago today that Ryan Day named CJ Stroud the starter. So maybe let's take it from this angle. How much different do you see CJ Stroud now than you did a year ago?
That's a tough question, especially for me, because I know I'll admit I was one of the people who was maybe a little bit harder on him at the beginning of the year, and even like in the non-conference portion of the schedule, saying, I'd like to see more of Kyle McCord and see what he would bring. And, I ate my words by the time that Rutgers game came along and he threw, 5 touchdown passes, and I was the first to admit that as well. So, I think in terms of just how much he's changed over the last year, he's a lot more comfortable, even in these settings themselves. Like, he's relaxed, he's, having fun with it and all that kind of stuff. And I think that ultimately that's going to translate to the field. But then he talked about today, he feels faster. He feels like he's, gained good weight. He's stronger, those kind of things. And when he's out on the field, like that's only going to make him a better quarterback as well.
He said he's as fast as he's ever been in his life. He has decided to embrace weightlifting since coming to Ohio State. And when Corey Dennis was asked who the fastest quarterback in the room is, he said Justin Fields, which I thought was a fun, crafty answer. Kyle McCord continues to look really good. He looks the part. He's got an absolute cannon for an arm. And I think there is more belief than ever in if for some reason CJ wasn't able to be on the field, knock on wood, you hope it doesn't happen. There's as much confidence right now in Kyle McCord as there's ever been. And I think Corey Dennis talked a lot about Kyle's, development off the field, the mental stuff, and how it's coming quicker for him now.
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece too, is just, having somebody who you can rely on in those situations. And then especially if Ohio State is as good as we expect them to be, there's going to be plenty of opportunities for Kyle McCord to come in and play. You're not going to want to have CJ out there in the third quarter of a blowout against, Indiana, or it's like 56-7 at some point, like he has to get those reps. And then if, God forbid, he goes down with an injury, you have to be able to feel confident in what he's going to bring and that he's going to not skip a beat when he's out there. So, yeah, I mean, to be able to have him come in and kind of, exude that confidence as somebody who's been around the program for a year now and just his comfortability in the offense and knowing what he's doing, like that is obviously a good thing. And from Devin Brown's perspective, what a blessing for him to feel like, hey, I'm just going to go compete and try to get better every single day, knowing that he might play a little bit this year. If games really get out of hand, he might get some snaps, but it's all about his long-term future and not his short-term future. And I think with his talent level, that just takes a lot of pressure off a dude to be able to develop. He's not going to get game reps a lot. He's not going to get a ton of reps with the ones, although we have seen him a couple times when we were able to watch practice a couple weeks ago. But I just feel like that's going to be really good for his growth. He's not in there trying to learn everything and feeling the pressure of trying to compete for a job right away. Yeah, and I think that if you do look back to last year, that was a big, interesting situation last year, really, for just all the quarterbacks in the room. They were all competing because they were hoping to be the starter. There was no kind of clear hierarchy, in terms of who was a starter, who was a backup, who was third string, when they were going to come in, because there was games that Jack Miller came in before Kyle McCord,
right?
I think there's just a matter of having that kind of set in stone and knowing what your role is and what what is expected of you and so forth. And especially for Devin, he's coming in, throwing 8 billion yards as a senior in high school. So, it's not like the talent isn't there. It's just a matter of getting, acclimated to the college game. Everything, especially on the defensive side, is going to be faster for him. So he needs to learn that in practice. And then once he is in a game situation, there's going to be growing pains. So it's not like you need to rely on him in the fourth quarter of a blowout game this year. It's just about building toward the future. And then next year when CJ is in the NFL, he's going to battle Kyle for that starting spot.
Training camp is almost over. It's hard to believe we are in the home stretch of it. We are 16 days from kicking off the season against Notre Dame at home. It's going to be here before we know it. And I think there's a lot of people that are pretty anxious to watch the Buckeyes go out there.